The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the Red River, New Mexico Depot, and Theresa Montgomery pressed her gloved hand against the dusty window, her heart hammering so hard she thought the other passengers might hear it. She had traveled over 1,000 miles from Philadelphia to marry a man she had never met, and now that the moment had arrived, every fiber of her being wanted to turn around and flee back to everything familiar. But there was nothing familiar left to return to. Her father had died 6 months ago, leaving debts that swallowed their modest home whole, and her aunt had made it clear that charity had limits. When the letter arrived from Edmund Xavier in New Mexico Territory, proposing marriage through a mutual acquaintance, Theresa had 3 choices: accept his offer, find work in a factory, or throw herself on the mercy of distant cousins who had already made their displeasure with her father's financial failures abundantly clear. The door swung open, and the driver offered his weathered hand to help her down. The June heat hit her like a physical force, so different from the humid summers back east. Everything here seemed sharper, harder, more unforgiving. The sun blazed in a sky so blue it hurt to look at, and the dusty main street of Red River stretched before her like a challenge. "Miss Montgomery," a voice called out, and Theresa turned to see a tall man approaching. He wore a clean shirt and vest despite the heat, and his dark hair was neatly combed beneath a brown hat. His face was pleasant enough, with a neatly trimmed beard and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "I am Edmund Xavier. Welcome to Red River." Theresa curtsied slightly, suddenly aware of how ridiculous the gesture seemed in this rough frontier town. "Mr. Xavier, thank you for meeting me. Please call me Edmund." He gestured to a wagon nearby. "I have arranged accommodations for you at the boarding house until the wedding. I thought you might appreciate some time to rest and adjust before we proceed with the ceremony. I hope that meets with your approval." His formality matched her own, and Theresa felt a small measure of relief. At least he seemed like a gentleman. "That is very thoughtful, thank you." As Edmund directed the driver to load her trunk onto his wagon, Theresa noticed another man leaning against the post outside the general store. He was younger than Edmund, perhaps only a few years older than her own 22 years, with sun-streaked brown hair that fell slightly too long beneath his black hat. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing tanned forearms, and his posture suggested a casual confidence that Edmund's formal bearing lacked. When their eyes met, something jolted through Theresa's chest, a recognition of something she could not name. He pushed away from the post and walked toward them with an easy stride. "Garrett," Edmund said, his tone cooling slightly. "I did not expect you here. Heard the stage was coming in." The younger man's voice was deeper than Edmund's, with a slight drawl that suggested he had been born to this land rather than settling it. His green eyes remained fixed on Theresa with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Figured I should meet the woman my brother is marrying." Brother. The word hit Theresa like cold water. She had known Edmund had family in the area, but he had never mentioned a brother in his letters. She forced herself to look away from Garrett's penetrating gaze and back to Edmund, who had pressed his lips into a thin line. "Theresa, this is my younger brother, Garrett Xavier. He helps run the ranch." Edmund's tone suggested this was not entirely welcome information. "Garrett, Miss Theresa Montgomery from Philadelphia. Miss Montgomery." Garrett removed his hat, revealing more of that sun-streaked hair, and something in the gesture felt more genuine than any of Edmund's careful courtesies. "Long journey. Hope Red River treats you better than the trip. Thank you." Theresa managed to keep her voice steady despite the strange flutter in her stomach. "The journey was indeed taxing, but your brother has been very welcoming." Edmund is good at manners. Was there an edge to Garrett's words? Before Theresa could decide, Edmund cleared his throat. "We should get Miss Montgomery settled. I am sure she is exhausted." He offered his arm to Theresa, and she took it, trying not to notice how Garrett's jaw tightened slightly at the gesture. The boarding house was run by a brisk woman named Mrs. Patterson, who showed Theresa to a small but clean room on the second floor. Edmund promised to call on her the following morning to show her the ranch, and then he was gone, leaving Theresa alone with her trunk and her turbulent thoughts. She moved to the window and looked down at the street below. Garrett stood beside Edmund's wagon, the two brothers clearly engaged in some kind of heated discussion. Even from this distance, Theresa could see the tension in their postures, the sharp gestures. Then Garrett shook his head, turned on his heel, and walked away toward the saloon, while Edmund climbed into his wagon and drove in the opposite direction. Theresa pressed her forehead against the warm glass and closed her eyes. What had she gotten herself into? The next morning brought no clarity, only more heat and a nervous knot in her stomach that breakfast could not ease. Edmund arrived promptly at 9, driving a much nicer carriage this time, clearly intending to impress her with the drive to the ranch. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened up into rolling hills dotted with scrub brush, and the occasional cluster of cottonwood trees marking a creek bed. In the distance, mountains rose purple and imposing against the endless sky. "The ranch has been in operation for 8 years, Edmund explained as he drove. "My father established it before he passed, and I have worked to expand it considerably. We run about 500 head of cattle, and we have been discussing adding sheep, though that has caused some disagreement locally. It sounds very successful." Theresa tried to sound enthusiastic, but her mind kept drifting to the moment yesterday when Garrett had looked at her, the way something had shifted in the air between them. "I hope to make it more so. With a proper household and eventually a family, I believe we can build something lasting here." Edmund glanced at her. "I know this arrangement is unconventional, Miss Montgomery, but I hope we can build a respectful and companionable marriage. I am not a man given to grand romantic gestures, but I will provide well for you and treat you with honor." It was more than many women got, Theresa knew, more than she had any right to expect given her circumstances, so why did the prospect feel like slowly suffocating? "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Xavier. Edmund, please, we are to be married in 3 days. I think we can dispense with excessive formality. 3 days." Theresa's hands tightened in her lap. It had seemed like enough time when they had discussed it in letters, but now it felt rushed, desperate. The ranch house appeared over a rise, a substantial structure of adobe and wood with a wide porch and several outbuildings scattered around it. Cattle dotted the hills beyond, and several men worked in a corral near the barn, breaking a young horse. It was impressive, exactly the kind of solid, prosperous establishment that should have made Theresa's heart sing with relief. Instead, her eyes immediately found Garrett. He stood near the corral fence, one boot propped on the lower rail as he watched the horse work. He had seen their approach. She could tell by the way his shoulders had tensed, but he did not turn around. Edmund helped her down from the carriage and began showing her through the house. It was well built and surprisingly refined for the frontier, with real glass windows and furniture that, while not fancy, was solid and comfortable. Edmund explained that he had a cook and housekeeper who came in daily from town, and that after the wedding, Theresa would of course take over management of the household as she saw fit. He showed her the parlor, the dining room, the kitchen, and then hesitated before leading her upstairs to the bedrooms. "This would be your room," he said, opening a door to a spacious chamber with a large bed and windows overlooking the front of the property. and mine adjoins it through that door, though of course I would never presume without your welcome." Theresa felt her face heat. They had not discussed such intimate matters in their letters, though obviously a marriage would include expectations. Edmund seemed to sense her discomfort and quickly moved on, showing her 2 other bedrooms that could eventually serve as children's rooms, and then they returned downstairs. As they stepped onto the porch, Garrett was there, leaning against the railing. Up close, Theresa could see the fine lines around his eyes from squinting against the sun, the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders. He had the build of a man who worked with his hands, who spent his days in the saddle rather than behind a desk. "Thought I should say a proper hello," Garrett said, his eyes meeting Theresa's directly, "without Edmund rushing you off." "I was not rushing anyone," Edmund said stiffly. "I was showing Theresa her future home." "Right, her future." Garrett's tone was neutral, but something flickered in his expression. He looked at Theresa. "What do you think of it, Miss Montgomery? Everything you hoped for?" It was a dangerous question, loaded with implications. Theresa chose her words carefully. "It is very impressive. Edmund has built something substantial here. Edmund is good at building things." Garrett pushed away from the railing. "Me, I am better at keeping them running. Someone has to actually work the cattle while he manages the books." "Garrett." Edmund's voice held a warning. "This is neither the time nor the place." "Right, because we would not want the bride to know that this place runs on more than good intentions and neat handwriting." Garrett's smile did not reach his eyes. "Sorry, Miss Montgomery. Family matters. I am sure you understand." Before Theresa could respond, Garrett turned and walked toward the barn, his stride long and purposeful. Edmund released a slow breath. "You will have to forgive my brother. He can be crude at times." Edmund's jaw was tight. "We have different approaches to the ranch, and it creates friction. He seems to care about this place." Theresa surprised herself by defending Garrett. "He does, in his way, but caring and managing are different things." Edmund offered his arm again. "Shall we have some lunch? I asked the cook to prepare something special." Through lunch, Theresa tried to focus on Edmund's conversation about the ranch's finances, the local politics, the growing town. But her mind kept drifting to Garrett, to the tension between the brothers, to the way her heart had sped up when Garrett's eyes met hers. This was madness. She was here to marry Edmund, to secure her future, to build the stable life she desperately needed. She could not afford to be distracted by his younger brother, no matter how something in her responded to his presence. After lunch, Edmund drove her back to town, promising to return the next day to introduce her to some of the other ranch wives in the area. Theresa spent the rest of the afternoon and evening in her room, trying to read a book she had brought from Philadelphia, but the words blurred on the page. She kept seeing Garrett's face, the challenge in his eyes, the way he had moved with such easy confidence. The next morning, Theresa woke early and dressed in one of her simpler dresses. The heat here required different clothing than Philadelphia, and she was grateful for the lighter fabrics, though they still felt too heavy. She went downstairs to find Mrs. Patterson serving breakfast to the few other boarders, all men passing through on business. Theresa ate quickly, uncomfortable under their curious stares, and then decided to take a walk through town before Edmund arrived. Red River was small but growing. Besides the general store and saloon, there was a church, a schoolhouse, a doctor's office, a blacksmith, and several other shops. Theresa wandered slowly, trying to imagine herself living here permanently, becoming part of this community. It was so different from Philadelphia, from everything she had known. The people looked at her with open curiosity, and several women nodded politely. She would be a subject of gossip, she knew. The mail-order bride coming to marry Edmund Xavier. She wondered what they thought of the match of her. She was standing outside the church, reading the notice board when a voice behind her said, "Thinking about backing out." Theresa spun to find Garrett standing a few feet away, his horse's reins loose in his hand. He must have ridden into town early. Her heart did that stupid flutter again. "Why would I back out?" she asked, trying to sound calm. Garrett shrugged and stepped closer. "Because you do not look at Edmund the way a woman should look at the man she is about to marry." The directness of it stole her breath. "You do not know me. You do not know how I look at anyone. Maybe not, but I know what I saw yesterday. You looked trapped." His green eyes searched her face. "Are you running from something, Miss Montgomery, or just running?" "That is none of your concern." But her voice lacked conviction, and they both knew it. "No, I suppose it is not. Edmund made his choice and you made yours." Garrett looked away toward the mountains in the distance. "But I keep thinking about what would have happened if I had been the one to place that advertisement. If you had come here for me instead." "Mr. Xavier, Theresa did not know what to say. Everything in her proper upbringing screamed that this conversation was inappropriate, that she should walk away immediately. But her feet remained planted, her eyes fixed on his profile. He turned back to her, and the intensity in his expression made her stomach clench. "If you were mine, I would not be planning a polite, companionable marriage. I would not be showing you the house like it is a business transaction. I would be courting you proper, taking you riding in the hills, showing you how beautiful this land can be at sunset, learning what makes you laugh." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rougher. "But you are not mine. You are going to be Edmund's wife, so I will back off and keep my distance and watch my brother marry a woman I cannot stop thinking about." Theresa's breath came quick and shallow. "You should not say such things. I am engaged to your brother, I know, and that is the only reason I am walking away right now." Garrett swung back into his saddle. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. "But if you ever decide you want something different than what Edmund is offering, if you want passion instead of partnership, someone needs to tell you that you have a choice, even if you do not think you do." He turned his horse and rode off before Theresa could respond, leaving her standing on the church steps with her heart racing and her carefully constructed plans crumbling around her. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady herself. This was wrong. Everything about what just happened was wrong. Garrett was Edmund's brother, and she had made a commitment, and she had no right to feel this way, but she did feel it. That was the terrible truth. In 2 brief encounters, Garrett had stirred something in her that Edmund's careful letters and polite courtesies never had. It was not just attraction, though she could not deny the physical pull. It was the way Garrett looked at her like she was someone worth knowing, not just a solution to the problem of an empty house and eventual children. It was the honesty in his words, the lack of pretense. "Miss Montgomery." Theresa nearly jumped out of her skin. She turned to find Edmund approaching in his carriage, right on time. "I am sorry I startled you. I did not expect to find you at the church. I was just taking a walk." Theresa forced a smile and accepted his hand up into the carriage. "Getting to know the town. Excellent idea. Though you should be careful walking alone. This is not Philadelphia, and while Red River is relatively civilized, there are still rough elements." Edmund clicked the reins and the horses started forward. "Today I thought we could visit the Hendersons. Mary Henderson is married to my ranch foreman, and I think you would enjoy her company." The day passed in a blur of introductions and polite conversation. Mary Henderson was kind and welcoming, with 3 young children who clung to her skirts. She gave Theresa practical advice about managing a household on the frontier, and seemed genuinely pleased to have another educated woman nearby. They visited 2 other ranch families as well, and everyone was cordial if curious. Theresa smiled and nodded and said all the right things, but inside she felt like she was watching herself from a distance, going through motions that no longer felt real. Edmund returned her to the boarding house as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that were achingly beautiful. "I think that went very well," he said with satisfaction. "You made an excellent impression. I knew you would fit in here." Everyone was very kind. Theresa hesitated, then forced herself to ask, "Edmund, may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why did you choose to seek a wife this way, through correspondence rather than courting someone local?" She needed to understand him better, to remember why she had agreed to this. Edmund was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on the reins though the horses were standing still. "I suppose because I wanted someone who understood refinement, who had education and culture. The women here are fine people, but they are frontier-born, and I want my children to have a mother who can teach them about the wider world. And," he paused, "I am not a man who finds courtship easy. I prefer clarity and honesty about expectations. A business arrangement, if you will, built on mutual respect rather than fleeting passion." There was that word again. Passion, or rather the dismissal of it. Theresa thought of Garrett's words, the fire in his eyes. "And you do not want love." "I think love is often an illusion that leads to disappointment. Respect and partnership last longer." Edmund looked at her. "Does that trouble you?" "No," Theresa lied. "I think it is sensible." "Good. Then I will see you tomorrow at the same time. We are having dinner at the ranch. Garrett will be there as well, as he should be. He is family, after all." Edmund's expression suggested this was a concession he was making for propriety's sake rather than desire. That night, Theresa lay awake in her narrow bed at the boarding house, staring at the ceiling. In one day, she would marry Edmund. The day after tomorrow, she would move into that adobe house and become Mrs. Edmund Xavier, lady of a successful ranch, respected member of the community. She would have security, comfort, a home. It was everything she had hoped for when she left Philadelphia with nothing but her trunk and her desperate need to survive. So why did it feel like she was about to lock herself in a cage? The dinner at the ranch. The next evening was awkward from the moment Theresa arrived. Edmund had dressed formally, and the table was set with what were clearly the finest dishes and linens the household possessed. Garrett was already there when Edmund brought Theresa in, standing by the window in the parlor, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He had cleaned up as well, his hair still damp from washing, wearing a clean shirt and vest. When he turned and saw Theresa, something flared in his eyes before he carefully shuttered his expression. "Miss Montgomery, you look lovely." His tone was polite, distant, so different from their last conversation. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier." Theresa matched his formality, though her hands trembled slightly as she removed her shawl. Dinner was a study in tension. Edmund talked about the ranch, about plans for expansion, about the wedding ceremony tomorrow. Garrett was mostly silent, speaking only when directly addressed. But Theresa could feel his eyes on her, could sense the weight of everything unspoken between them. Several times she caught him staring, and each time he looked away quickly, his jaw tight. Finally, as they finished the main course, Edmund excused himself to speak with the foreman about some issue with the cattle. "I will only be a moment," he promised. "Garrett, please keep Theresa company." The moment Edmund left, the air in the room changed. Garrett set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying her openly now. "Are you really going through with this?" "Why would I not?" But Theresa's voice was not as steady as she wanted it to be. "Because you do not love him. You do not even know him." Garrett's voice was low, intense. "And he does not know you. He wants a wife who looks good on his arm and manages his house. But what do you want, Theresa? The use of her first name sent a shiver through her. I want security. A home. I want to not be terrified about where I will sleep next month or how I will eat. And that is enough for you. Just survival. It has to be. Theresa stood, needing distance from him from the pull she felt. She walked to the window, looking out at the darkening landscape. I do not have the luxury of waiting for passion or romance. I made a commitment, and I intend to honor it. She heard his chair scrape back, then his footsteps as he approached. He stopped just behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the scent of soap and leather and something uniquely him. What if I asked you not to marry him? Theresa closed her eyes. You have no right to ask that. I know, but I am asking anyway. His voice was rough with emotion. I have been trying to stay away, to do the right thing by Edmund, by you. But I cannot watch you marry him tomorrow knowing I never told you the truth. I have been drawn to you from the moment you stepped off that stage, and I think you feel it too. It does not matter what I feel. But her voice broke on the words, giving lie to them. It is the only thing that matters. Garrett's hand touched her arm, gentle but insistent, turning her to face him. They were too close now, close enough that Theresa could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the slight stubble on his jaw. Edmund wants a wife. I want you. There is a difference. I cannot. But even as she said it, Theresa swayed toward him, her body betraying her resolve. This is wrong. You are his brother. I know. And if you tell me right now that you love Edmund, that you want to marry him, I will step back and never speak of this again. But if there is any doubt in your heart, any part of you that wants something more, then you owe it to yourself to consider it before you make vows you cannot take back. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with heartbreaking tenderness. Do not marry him because you are afraid. Marry him because you want to. Theresa's breath caught. She should step back, should slap him, should do something to break this moment. But she was frozen, caught between what she knew she should do and what every fiber of her being suddenly screamed that she wanted. If I do not marry Edmund, I have nothing. I would have to return to Philadelphia in disgrace, and I have no home there anymore. I would be ruined. You would have me. Garrett's voice was fierce. I know I do not have what Edmund has. I am just a ranch hand, really, even if it is family land. I cannot offer you the big house or the status, but I can offer you something real, something honest. Garrett. His name on her lips felt dangerous, intimate. I barely know you. Then let me show you who I am. Give me a chance before you bind yourself to Edmund forever. His eyes searched hers, desperate. Come riding with me tomorrow morning, before the wedding. Let me show you the land, show you what your life could be. And if afterward you still want to marry Edmund, I will stand beside him and watch him make his vows and never say another word. But please, just give me one morning. Give yourself one morning to be sure. Edmund would never allow it. Even as she said it, Theresa knew it was a weak protest. Do not tell him. Tell him you need time alone to prepare, to pray, whatever you need to say. Meet me at the ridge east of town at dawn. Just a few hours, Theresa. That is all I am asking. She should refuse. Every practical bone in her body, every lesson in proper behavior she had ever learned, screamed at her to refuse. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, all right, dawn. But only a few hours, and then I will marry Edmund as planned. The relief and hope that flooded Garrett's face was almost painful to witness. He started to say something, but they heard Edmund's footsteps on the porch. Garrett stepped back quickly, putting proper distance between them, and by the time Edmund entered, they were on opposite sides of the room. Sorry for the interruption, Edmund said. Ranch business never seems to rest. Has Garrett been entertaining you? He has been the perfect gentleman, Theresa managed, not looking at Garrett. But I think I should return to town now. Tomorrow is a significant day and I need rest. Of course. Let me get the carriage ready. Edmund left again, and in the few seconds they had alone, Garrett caught her eyes. Dawn, he said quietly. East Ridge. There is a path marked with 3 white stones. Theresa nodded once, then turned away before she could change her mind, before the enormity of what she had just agreed to could sink in fully. She was playing with fire, and she knew it. But for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, since losing her father and her home and everything secure in her life, she felt something other than numb acceptance. She felt alive. That night, Theresa did not sleep. She packed her wedding dress carefully, tried to read scripture for calm, paced her small room. What was she doing? Meeting Garrett in secret on the morning of her wedding to his brother. It was madness, scandal, disaster waiting to happen. She should stay in town, prepare for the ceremony at noon, marry Edmund as planned. But as the sky began to lighten outside her window, Theresa found herself changing into her riding habit, the one she had brought from Philadelphia thinking it might be useful on a ranch. She left a note for Mrs. Patterson saying she needed some air before the ceremony and would return in time to dress. Then she slipped out of the boarding house into the cool pre-dawn stillness. The path to the East Ridge was easy to find, marked just as Garrett had said with 3 white stones. Theresa's heart pounded as she climbed, her practical boots finding purchase on the rocky trail. What would she say to him? What did she expect to happen? This was foolish, reckless, the opposite of everything she had come here to do. Garrett was waiting at the top of the ridge, holding the reins of 2 horses. He had clearly been there for some time, watching the eastern horizon lighten. When he heard her approach, he turned, and the expression on his face made Theresa's chest ache. Hope and fear and something deeper, something that looked almost like pain. I was not sure you would come. His voice was rough, as though he had not slept either. I almost did not. Theresa stopped a few feet away, suddenly shy. In the growing light, with no one else around, this felt even more intimate and dangerous than their conversation yesterday. I am still not sure this is wise. Wisdom is overrated. Garrett moved toward her, leading one of the horses. This is Daisy. She is gentle and steady. Do you ride? I used to before my father's troubles, but it has been years. She will take care of you. Garrett helped her mount, his hands careful and respectful even as they lingered a moment longer than necessary on her waist. Then he swung onto his own horse with easy grace. Come on. I want to show you something. They rode east as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed impossible, too vivid to be real. Garrett led them through a landscape that gradually transformed from scrub and sand to higher ground with more vegetation, more life. He pointed out the plants and animals they passed, explaining the ecosystem in a way that revealed deep knowledge and genuine love of the land. He was so different from Edmund's formal presentations, so alive and present in every moment. After about an hour, they reached a place where the land fell away to reveal a stunning vista. Below them, a valley spread green and lush, fed by a small river that wound through it like a silver ribbon. Wildflowers dotted the hills in patches of yellow and purple, and in the distance, elk grazed peacefully. The early morning light made everything look magical, untouched. This is Xavier Creek, Garrett said quietly. The river that gave my father the idea to settle here. Edmund focuses on the main ranch to the west, the practical parts. But this is what I love. This is what keeps me here. Theresa could not speak for a moment. The beauty of it stole her words. It is breathtaking. It is yours if you want it. Garrett dismounted and came to help her down. They stood close together on the ridge, the horses grazing behind them, the world spreading out before them in all its wild glory. I know I cannot offer you what Edmund can. I do not have the big house or the status or the financial security, but I can give you this. I can give you freedom and honesty and passion. I can give you a life where you wake up every morning wanting to be exactly where you are, with exactly who you are with. Garrett. Theresa's voice trembled. Even if I wanted to choose you, which I am not saying I do, the scandal would be enormous. Edmund would be humiliated. You would be estranged from your brother. I would be labeled a fallen woman. How could we possibly build a life on that foundation? People talk. Then they move on to the next scandal. Yes, it would be hard at first. Yes, Edmund would be angry, but he would recover. He would find someone else who wants what he is offering. Garrett took her hands in his, and the contact sent electricity through her. But I will not recover from watching you marry him, and I do not think you will recover from marrying someone you do not love when you knew you had another choice. How do I know this is not just rebellion or infatuation? How do I know it is real? But even as she asked, Theresa knew the answer. She had felt the difference from the first moment. What she felt with Garrett was the opposite of what she felt with Edmund. It was fire versus ice, passion versus practicality, choosing life over merely surviving. You do not know, not for certain, but that is what makes it real. Garrett lifted one of her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that made her shiver. Edmund can promise you certainty and security. I can only promise you truth. I cannot promise we will not struggle, or that building a life will be easy. But I can promise I will never ask you to be anything but exactly who you are. I will never treat you like a business arrangement or a piece of furniture to make my house complete. I will love you, Theresa, every day with everything I am. Tears burned Theresa's eyes. When had anyone last spoken to her like this? When had anyone last seen her as more than a burden or a solution or an obligation? I am scared. I know. So am I. Garrett pulled her closer, and Theresa let herself lean against his solid warmth, let herself feel protected and wanted and desired all at once. But I would rather be scared with you than safe with someone else. Edmund is expecting me at noon. The church is ready. People will be there. But the words felt hollow now, excuses rather than reasons. So we tell him, together, this morning before the ceremony. We tell him the truth, that we cannot go through with this, that feelings have developed that neither of us expected. Garrett's hand came up to cup her face, tilting it up to his. I will not ask you to run away or hide. We face it head on, accept the consequences, and start building something real. What do you say? Theresa looked up into his eyes, those green eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul, and felt something shift irrevocably inside her. She thought of Edmund's formal courtesies, his talk of companionable marriage and business arrangements. She thought of the life she had imagined as his wife, respectable and secure and utterly empty of joy. And then she thought of this, of standing on a ridge watching the sunrise with a man who looked at her like she was the answer to every question he had never known to ask. Yes. The word came out as a whisper, but once said, it grew stronger. Yes, we tell Edmund together. We face it together. The smile that broke across Garrett's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He pulled her close and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and finally, tentatively, her lips. It was gentle at first, questioning, asking permission. But when Theresa's hands came up to grip his shirt, pulling him closer, the kiss deepened into something that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Theresa was shaking. She had been kissed before, chaste kisses from proper suitors in Philadelphia, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt like falling and flying at the same time. We should go, Garrett said, his voice rough. before I lose all sense and keep you up here forever." They rode back to town slowly, neither wanting to rush toward the difficult confrontation ahead. Garrett told her about his plans, the small cabin he had been building on the eastern part of the ranch land, near the valley he had shown her. He had been working on it for 2 years, slowly, thinking of it as a future possibility when he had saved enough to strike out on his own. Now it could be their home, modest but theirs. "Edmund might try to force me off the land entirely," Garrett admitted. "The ranch was our father's, but Edmund has been running it and has the papers. He could make things difficult. Then we will go somewhere else." Theresa was surprised by her own certainty. "We will find land somewhere and start over if we have to." "You would do that?" "Give up security for uncertainty." "I have already lived with uncertainty. I survived it, but I do not know if I can survive a lifetime of emotional emptiness, even if it comes with financial security." Theresa reached across the space between their horses to take his hand. "I choose you, Garrett. I choose a chance at something real." They reached the Xavier Ranch just after 9 in the morning. Edmund was on the porch, clearly agitated when he saw them riding in together. His face went through a series of expressions as they dismounted: confusion, disapproval, and then a dawning understanding that made his features harden. "What is the meaning of this?" His voice was cold. "Theresa, you should be in town preparing for the ceremony." "And Garrett, I told you to stay away from her." "Edmund, we need to talk to you." Garrett's voice was steady, but Theresa could feel the tension in him as he stood beside her. "Inside, please. This is not a conversation for the yard." Edmund's eyes narrowed, but he turned and led them into the house. In the parlor where they had dined just last night, he turned to face them, his arms crossed. "Explain, now." Theresa stepped forward before she could lose her nerve. "Edmund, I am sorry. I know this is not what you expected, and I know I owe you an enormous apology. But I cannot marry you, not in good conscience, not when my feelings have changed." "Changed?" Edmund's voice was flat. "In 3 days. Your feelings have changed in 3 days." His eyes moved to Garrett, and understanding turned to fury. You did this. You have been working against me from the start." "I did not plan this," Garrett said quietly. "It happened. Neither of us expected it. How convenient. The day of the wedding, my bride suddenly has changed feelings for my younger brother." Edmund's laugh was bitter. "Do you understand what you have done? I brought her here. I paid for her passage. I made arrangements, sent announcements. Everyone in town knows I am getting married today. And now you come here and tell me you have stolen my intended." "I am not property to be stolen," Theresa said, finding her voice stronger now. "Edmund, I am truly sorry for the embarrassment and inconvenience. You have been nothing but kind to me. But you yourself said you wanted a marriage of partnership, not passion. You wanted respect and practicality. What kind of partnership would we have if I married you while having feelings for someone else? Would that be the honorable thing to do?" Edmund opened his mouth, then closed it. Some of the anger drained from his face, replaced by something that might have been hurt if he allowed himself to show it. "So you would throw away security, respectability, everything I offered for what? Passion? Romance? Pretty words from my irresponsible brother." "For a chance at something real," Theresa said softly. "Yes." Edmund was silent for a long moment, then he turned to Garrett. "Get out, get off my land. You have 24 hours to collect your things and leave. I never want to see you again." "Edmund." Garrett started, but his brother held up a hand. Do not try to explain or apologize or justify this betrayal. You are my brother, and I would have given you anything. I gave you work, a home, a place here, and you repay me by stealing my bride." Edmund's voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion breaking through. "I knew you resented me, but I never thought you would do this." "I do not resent you," Garrett said. "I just want a different life than you want, and I fell in love. I am sorry it happened this way, but I cannot be sorry it happened. Get out." Edmund turned his back on them both. "Both of you. I will have someone pack your things, Garrett. Come by the barn this evening to collect them, but I do not want to see your face. As for you, Miss Montgomery, consider our arrangement terminated. I will not sue for the travel expenses, though I would be within my rights to do so. But I want you both gone from my sight." There was nothing left to say. Garrett took Theresa's hand and they walked out of the house together. On the porch, Theresa realized she was shaking. The enormity of what they had just done, what she had just given up, crashed over her. "Hey." Garrett turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "We are going to be all right, I promise you. I just ruined your relationship with your brother. I potentially cost you your home and your work. What if you come to resent me for it?" The fear was real sharp. "That will never happen." Garrett's certainty was absolute. "Edmund and I have been heading toward this break for years. This was just the catalyst. And as for the rest, we will figure it out together. We have each other. That is all we need to start." Such optimism, I hope it is warranted. "It is, you will see." Garrett kissed her forehead. "Now we need to get you back to town to collect your things. And I need to talk to a few people about work and a place to stay until I can finish the cabin. It will be a busy day." "What do I tell people? About the wedding?" Theresa's stomach churned at the thought of facing Mrs. Patterson, facing the town. The truth. "You called it off because your heart was elsewhere. Let them gossip. They will anyway." Garrett helped her back onto Daisy. "And Theresa, no matter what happens next, no matter how hard it gets, I want you to know I will never regret this. Never. I hope I can say the same." But as they rode back toward town, with the sun climbing higher in the sky and the day warming around them, Theresa felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope. The next few weeks were every bit as difficult as Theresa had feared. Word of the broken engagement spread through Red River like wildfire. Mrs. Patterson was scandalized and insisted Theresa find other accommodations, though she gave her 3 days to do so. The women who had been so welcoming when she was Edmund's intended now regarded her with suspicion or outright hostility. Mary Henderson actually crossed the street to avoid speaking to her. Theresa heard the whispers, the speculation about what had really happened, the rumors that ranged from merely unkind to outright vicious. Garrett found work on a neighboring ranch owned by a man named Samuel Harris, who seemed amused by the whole scandal rather than judgmental about it. "Hell, son, half the marriages out here started unconventional," Harris said when Garrett explained the situation. "If you and the lady want to make a go of it, that is your business. I need a good hand, and I hear you are the best. Rest is just entertainment for folks with too much time." He also offered Garrett and Theresa the use of a small foreman's cabin on his property until Garrett's own place was habitable. It was tiny, just one room with a loft and a basic kitchen area, but it was shelter and privacy. The problem was that as unmarried individuals, staying together would only fuel the scandal further. "We should get married," Garrett said the day they moved Theresa's trunk into the cabin. "Right away. Not a big ceremony, just something simple at the church. That will quiet at least some of the talk." "Will it? Or will people just say we were carrying on before Edmund and I broke the engagement?" But Theresa knew he was right. Their position was untenable otherwise. "Let them say what they want, but I want to marry you anyway, scandal or no scandal. I want you to be my wife." Garrett took both her hands. "I know this is not the proposal you probably imagined. No ring, no formal presentation, no blessing from family. But will you marry me, Theresa Montgomery? Will you build this crazy life with me?" Looking at him in the humble cabin with its rough furniture and dusty floor, wearing work clothes and smelling of horse and hay, Theresa felt more sure than she had of anything since this whole adventure began. Yes, yes, I will marry you. They married 4 days later in the same church where Theresa was supposed to have married Edmond. The minister was reluctant, but could not find legitimate cause to refuse them, as both were of age and legally free to wed. Samuel Harris stood as witness, along with his wife Martha, a pragmatic woman who seemed to find the whole situation romantic rather than scandalous. There were no flowers, no fancy dress, no celebration afterward. Just vows spoken with fierce sincerity, and rings that Garrett had purchased with most of his saved wages, simple gold bands that weighed almost nothing but meant everything. When the minister pronounced them married and Garrett kissed her, Theresa felt something settle in her soul. This was right. Whatever hardships lay ahead, this was where she was meant to be. The first months of marriage were hard. Not between them, but around them. Work was physically demanding, and money was tight. Garrett spent every spare moment working on their cabin, trying to get it finished before winter. Theresa learned to cook on a temperamental stove, to wash clothes in a tub outside, to make one chicken stretch into 4 meals. It was nothing like the life she would have had with Edmond, and there were moments when she woke in the night, terrified that she had made a horrible mistake, that love would not be enough. But then Garrett would pull her close, and she would remember why she had chosen this. He noticed when she was tired and took over tasks without being asked. He brought her wildflowers he found while riding fences. He told her she was beautiful even when she was covered in dust and sweat from helping him patch the cabin roof. He made her laugh with stories of his day, and he listened, really listened, when she talked about her fears and hopes. By September, the cabin was finished. It was small but well built, with real windows and a stone fireplace and a bedroom separate from the main living space. It sat on a piece of land that bordered the creek Garrett had shown her that first morning, with a view of the valley that took Theresa's breath away every time she stepped outside. Samuel Harris had allowed them to lease the land with an option to buy, giving Garrett time to save up the full price. "Someday, we will own all of this," Garrett said as they stood on the porch of their new home watching the sunset. "We will have cattle and horses and maybe some chickens. We will build this into something we can be proud of." "We already have something to be proud of," Theresa said, leaning into his side. "We built this. Despite everything, we made it work. We are just getting started." Garrett kissed the top of her head. "Wait until you see what we can do with a whole lifetime." That winter was harsh, with snowstorms that sometimes kept them trapped inside for days at a time. But those days were some of Theresa's favorite memories. They would sit by the fire, Garrett carving small pieces of wood into intricate shapes, Theresa reading aloud from the precious few books they owned. They talked for hours, learning each other's histories, dreams, fears. They made love in the warmth of their bed while the wind howled outside, and Theresa understood for the first time what passion really meant, what it was to be truly known by another person. By spring, Theresa was pregnant. She knew before she even missed her monthly courses, knew from the way her body felt different, more alive. When she told Garrett, he picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests, his face alight with joy. "We are going to have a family," he said, wonder in his voice. "A real family, built on love. Our children will never doubt that their parents chose each other, that we wanted them." The pregnancy was not easy. Theresa was sick for months, and the nearest doctor was in town, a ride she could not always manage. Martha Harris became her saving grace, checking on her regularly, bringing herbal remedies and practical advice. The older woman's acceptance helped thaw some of the ice from the rest of the community. Slowly, grudgingly, people began to treat them as simply another young couple rather than objects of scandal. They saw Edmund once in town that summer. He was with a woman Theresa did not recognize, someone from Albuquerque, according to the whispers. He looked older, harder, but not unhappy. When their eyes met across the street, Edmund's expression went cold and he deliberately turned away, steering his companion in the opposite direction. "Does it hurt?" Theresa asked Garrett afterward. "Seeing him like that?" "Yes," Garrett admitted. "He is still my brother no matter what happened, but I made my choice and I would make it again." He squeezed her hand. "Every time I would choose you." In October, after nearly 20 hours of labor assisted by Martha and the town midwife who grudgingly agreed to come, Theresa gave birth to a son. They named him Thomas, after Theresa's father. He had Garrett's green eyes and a powerful set of lungs that announced his displeasure at the slightest inconvenience. Garrett held him with such tenderness and awe that Theresa fell in love with her husband all over again. "He is perfect," Garrett whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "You are perfect. Thank you for this, for him, for choosing us." Those early months with Thomas were exhausting and wonderful. Theresa learned to function on little sleep, to nurse while doing other tasks, to interpret the different meanings of her son's cries. Garrett was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas in the middle of the night, changing nappies without complaint, talking to the baby in a soft, loving voice that made Theresa's heart ache. As Thomas grew, so did their fortunes. Garrett's hard work and skill caught the attention of other ranchers, and he began to get offers for contract work, breaking horses and managing difficult cattle drives. The money was good, and he saved every spare penny toward buying their land outright. By the time Thomas was 2, they owned the cabin and the surrounding 50 acres free and clear. They bought their first cattle, just 10 head to start, but it was a beginning. The town finally, truly accepted them when Thomas was baptized in the same church where they had married. The minister spoke about redemption and new beginnings, and afterward, several of the women who had shunned Theresa came to admire the baby and offer stiff but genuine congratulations. Mary Henderson even apologized for her coldness. "I was loyal to Edmund," she explained. "But Martha Harris says you and Garrett are the real thing, that anyone can see you are in love, and your boy is beautiful. I hope we can be friends now." "I would like that," Theresa said, meaning it. She had been lonely for female companionship, for the community of women that seemed so essential on the frontier. That summer, word reached them that Edmund had married his lady from Albuquerque in a grand ceremony. The gossip was that she came from money, that Edmund was expanding the ranch considerably, that he was positioning himself to become a major political figure in the territory. Theresa felt a pang of guilt, wondering if she had hurt him more deeply than she knew, but Garrett shook his head. "Edmund always wanted status and power. Sounds like he found someone who can help him get it. He is probably happier than he would have been with you if he can be happy with anyone." Garrett pulled her close. "We all ended up where we needed to be." When Thomas was 3, Theresa became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. She continued working alongside Garrett as much as she could, tending their growing garden, managing the chickens they had finally acquired, even helping with the gentler cattle work. She had become a true frontier woman, strong and capable in ways she never had been in Philadelphia. Their daughter was born in early spring, an easier birth that left Theresa tired but elated. They named her Rose, for the wild roses that grew along the creek. She had Theresa's dark hair and Garrett's determined chin, and Thomas was fascinated by his tiny sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help. "Our family," Garrett said one evening as they sat on the porch, Thomas playing at their feet while Rose slept in Theresa's arms. "Did you ever imagine this when you stepped off that stage 3 years ago?" "Not in my wildest dreams," Theresa admitted. "I thought I was coming to a prison of respectability. Instead, I found freedom and love and a life I actually want to live." "You ever regret it? The choice you made? The security you gave up?" It was a question Garrett had asked before, and Theresa suspected he would always need reassurance, always carry some guilt for the upheaval he had caused in her life. "Never." Theresa reached for his hand. "This is harder than life with Edmund would have been, that is true. We have less money, less status, more work. But I wake up happy, Garrett. I wake up next to a man I love in a home we built together with children we adore. How could I regret that?" As the years passed, their little ranch grew and prospered. By the time Thomas was 10 and Rose was 7, they had expanded to nearly 200 acres and 100 head of cattle. They had built an addition onto the cabin, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room. They had hired their first hand, a young man looking to learn ranching. Theresa had started a small business selling eggs and vegetables in town, and her reputation as a fair dealer and hard worker had long since eclipsed the scandal of her broken engagement. They had 2 more children, another boy they named James and a second daughter called Lily. The cabin was always full of noise and life and love. Theresa taught the children to read and write, and Garrett taught them to ride and to respect the land. They grew up knowing the story of how their parents met, how love had been worth the scandal and the struggle. One autumn day, when Thomas was 16 and preparing to leave for a year of education in Santa Fe, a stranger arrived at the ranch. Theresa was hanging laundry when she saw the horse approach, and something about the rider's bearing made her heart clench. It was not until he dismounted that she recognized Edmund. He was older, grayer, heavier than the last time she had seen him. His face was lined with what looked like weariness or disappointment. He removed his hat when he saw her. "Miss Montgomery, or I suppose it is Mrs. Xavier now." His voice was neutral, carefully controlled. "Mr. Xavier." Theresa's hands were full of wet sheets and she felt at a distinct disadvantage. "This is unexpected. I apologize for arriving unannounced. I was in the area on business and—" He trailed off, looking around the ranch with an expression she could not quite read. "I wanted to see what you built." "What my brother built. Garrett is out with the cattle, but he should return soon. Would you like some coffee?" Theresa was not sure if hospitality was appropriate, but old habits died hard. "Thank you, yes." They sat in awkward silence on the porch, drinking coffee that Theresa wished she had made stronger. Finally, Edmund spoke. "I heard you have 4 children." "Yes, Thomas, Rose, James, and Lily, and the ranch is doing well enough. We work hard, but we are content." Theresa studied him. "May I ask why you are really here, Edmund?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose I wanted to see if you were happy, if it was worth it, what you did, what you gave up." "I am happy, genuinely happy. Are you?" Edmund's laugh was bitter. "My wife left me 2 years ago. Returned to Albuquerque with most of my money. Turns out she was far more interested in my prospects than in me. I have no children, no real friends, just business associates and political allies. I have everything I thought I wanted, and it is all hollow." Theresa's heart ached for him despite everything. "I am sorry. That must be very painful. You were right that day in my house when you called off the wedding. You said that marrying someone without love would be wrong. I did not believe you. I thought practical considerations were enough. But they are not." He met her eyes. "You saved us both from a loveless marriage. I was too proud and hurt to see it then, but I see it now. I wanted to thank you for that." Before Theresa could respond, she heard the sound of horses. Garrett rode in with Thomas, both of them dusty from the day's work. When Garrett saw Edmund, he tensed visibly but did not run. He dismounted slowly and approached the porch. "Edmund." "Garrett." The brothers faced each other with 15 years of pain and distance between them. "I came to apologize. For cutting you off, for holding a grudge, for letting pride keep me from family." Garrett glanced at Theresa, then back to his brother. "I am sorry, too. For the way it happened, I never wanted to hurt you. I know that now. I probably knew it then, but I could not admit it." Edmund looked between them. "You built something good here, something real. I wish I had the grace to be happy for you from the beginning instead of bitter." "It is not too late," Garrett said carefully, "if you want to try to rebuild something between us." The conversation that followed was halting and awkward. Years of hurt feelings not easily resolved in an afternoon. But it was a beginning. Edmund stayed for dinner, meeting all the children, seeming genuinely charmed by their energy and curiosity. He told Thomas about opportunities in Santa Fe, offered advice about education and business that was clearly rooted in real experience. When he finally left, as the sun was setting, there was an understanding that he would return, that doors long closed might slowly open again. "Do you think we can really be brothers again?" Garrett asked Theresa that night as they prepared for bed. "I think you can be something again, maybe not what you were, but something new." Theresa kissed him gently. "People change, people heal. We are proof of that." As the years continued to pass, Edmund did visit occasionally, usually bringing gifts for the children and staying for a meal. He never remarried, and Theresa sometimes wondered if he had given up on finding the kind of love she and Garrett shared. But he seemed to find some measure of peace in being uncle to their children, in having family even if not a family of his own. When Thomas married at 23, Edmund stood beside Garrett as the young man's uncles. The rift finally, truly healed. Theresa watched them together and felt the last weight of guilt lift from her shoulders. Everyone had found their way to where they needed to be. Rose married a few years later, and James after that. Lily, their youngest, chose to stay and help run the ranch, showing no interest in marriage but every interest in expanding their cattle operation and modernizing their methods. Theresa and Garrett became grandparents, then grandparents again, watching their family tree grow and branch. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Garrett took Theresa back to the ridge where he had first brought her that fateful morning before her supposed wedding to Edmund. They were both grayer now, marked by the years of hard work and the harsh climate. But when Garrett looked at her, Theresa still saw the same intensity, the same love that had made her throw away security for the chance at something real. "Was it worth it?" Garrett asked, echoing the question he had asked so many times over the years. "All the struggle, all the hardship we could have avoided." Theresa thought about their life together. The first winter in the tiny cabin when they had barely had enough food, the year of drought that nearly broke them. The loss of Theresa's sister, 2 children when they were just days old, buried in the small cemetery near the creek. The endless work, the worn hands, the sacrifices both large and small. Then she thought about the laughter that filled their home. The pride in watching their children grow into good, strong people. The quiet evenings on the porch with Garrett's hand in hers. The passion that had never truly faded, that still made her heart race when he smiled at her a certain way. The absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "It was worth everything," she said firmly. "I would choose you again and again in every lifetime, in every version of this story. Even if I am just a poor cowboy with nothing to offer but love." Garrett's eyes twinkled, especially then. Theresa pulled him close for a kiss that was as full of promise as their first had been, all those years ago. Love turned out to be everything I needed after all. They stayed on the ridge until sunset, watching the light paint the valley in shades of gold and red, the land they had built a life on spread out below them. In the distance, they could see their ranch, smoke rising from the chimney where Lily was no doubt preparing dinner. They could see the barn that had been expanded 3 times to hold more livestock. They could see the fence lines that marked the boundaries of the 300 acres they now owned outright. But more than the physical evidence of their success, Theresa could see the shape of their life together, the family they had created, the love they had nurtured through good times and bad. She thought about that frightened girl who had stepped off the stage coach 25 years ago, expecting nothing more than survival. She wished she could tell that girl that she would find so much more. That taking a risk on love, on passion, on the wild hope that life could be more than merely endured, would lead to more happiness than she could have imagined. As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering dusk, Theresa felt profoundly grateful for every choice that had led her to this moment. Grateful for the strange providence that had brought her to Red River. Grateful for Edmund's formal proposal that had seemed like salvation at the time. And most of all, grateful for Garrett, for the cowboy who had stood beside his brother's wagon and looked at her like she was worth risking everything for, who had asked if she would choose him instead, and then spent a lifetime proving he had been the right choice. Years later, when Theresa was in her 70s and Garrett's hands were too stiff with arthritis to do heavy ranch work anymore, they would sit on that same porch and watch their grandchildren play in the yard. Lily ran the ranch now, with help from Thomas's oldest son. Rose lived in town with her family, and James had moved to California but visited when he could. Edmund, now quite elderly himself, had moved into a small house on the ranch property, finally accepting that family was more important than pride. "Tell us the story again, grandmother," the youngest grandchildren would beg. "Tell us how you and grandfather fell in love." And Theresa would tell them, leaving out the more scandalous details but keeping the heart of it intact. How she had come to marry one man and fallen in love with another. How a cowboy had asked if she would choose him instead, and how she had found the courage to say yes. How love and hard work and unwavering commitment had built something that lasted, something worth every sacrifice and struggle. "The point," she would always tell them, "is not that we chose perfectly. We made mistakes, we hurt people we cared about, we struggled and sometimes failed. The point is that we chose each other, and then we kept choosing each other every single day after that. That is what love really is. Not the first rush of feeling, but the daily decision to stay, to work, to build a life together no matter what comes." Garrett would squeeze her hand, his eyes still green even if faded with age, and Theresa would feel the same surge of rightness she had felt standing on that ridge so many years ago. They had built a good life, a real life, full of love and meaning and joy. And it had all started with one wild, reckless choice to listen to her heart instead of her fear. On a warm spring morning, when Theresa was 78 and Garrett was 81, they sat together on the porch watching the sunrise. Garrett had been increasingly frail over the winter, and Theresa knew with a deep ache that their time together was drawing to a close. But there was peace in him, contentment in a life well lived. "I was just thinking," Garrett said softly, his hand clasped in hers, "about that first morning I brought you here, how scared we both were, how uncertain everything seemed. I remember, I thought I was throwing away my only chance at security." Theresa smiled. "I had no idea I was actually choosing my only chance at real happiness. You have any regrets, truly?" It was the last time he would ask the question that had defined their marriage. Theresa thought about everything they had been through, everything they had built. She thought about the children who carried their values and their love forward into the next generation. She thought about the grandchildren, and even the few great-grandchildren who bore their legacy. She thought about the ranch that had grown from nothing into something substantial, proof that love and hard work could build miracles. Most of all, she thought about the man beside her, still holding her hand after more than 50 years of marriage. The cowboy who had risked everything to give her a choice. The husband who had loved her through illness and health, poverty and prosperity, joy and sorrow. The partner who had made every day of their life together an adventure worth living. Not a single one, she said firmly. Except maybe that I did not say yes to you sooner. Garrett laughed, the sound weaker than it used to be but no less genuine. You said yes exactly when you were ready. That is all I ever wanted. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the world in light and warmth. Around them, the ranch woke up to another day. Cattle lowed in the distance. Birds sang in the cottonwoods by the creek. Somewhere inside they could hear Lily starting breakfast, the clatter of pans and the smell of coffee drifting out. It was an ordinary morning, unremarkable in almost every way. But to Theresa, it was perfect. Because she was here in the home they had built, with the man she loved, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a choice well made. When Garrett passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 months later, Theresa grieved deeply but without regret. They had been granted more than 50 years together, years full of love and partnership and joy. At his funeral, all 4 children spoke about what their father had taught them about love, about commitment, about choosing happiness over security. Edmund, now himself quite frail, stood and spoke about his brother's courage in following his heart, and about forgiveness and family. Theresa lived another 5 years, staying active on the ranch until nearly the end. She spent her final years surrounded by family, telling stories, offering wisdom, and insisting to anyone who would listen that love was always worth the risk. When she passed quietly in her sleep, holding the worn gold band that Garrett had placed on her finger more than half a century before, her last conscious thought was gratitude. She was buried next to Garrett on a hill overlooking the valley they had loved, with a simple stone that read, Theresa Montgomery Xavier, 1857–1937. She chose love. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, each inheritor adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Theresa and Garrett had built. The tale of how they met, how she came to marry his brother but chose him instead, became family legend, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. But for those who had known them, who had seen them together, there was nothing mythical about it. It was simply the story of 2 people who found each other against all odds and built a life worth living on the foundation of love and choice and unwavering commitment. And in the end, that was the truest kind of love story there could be. Not perfect, not easy, but real and lasting and absolutely worth every moment of struggle it took to create it. Theresa had stepped off that stagecoach in Red River, New Mexico, expecting nothing more than survival. Instead, she found everything that made life worth living. And it all started with a cowboy who asked if she would choose him instead, and a woman brave enough to say yes.